In Edmonton, we had a big fight on the floor about the federal government is giving money to political parties. I think it's $2 per vote. And should the Libertarian Party accept that money that came to us? And so I suppose our session today is about that. Three issues are, first off, can a Libertarian accept a government pension or government job and still be a Libertarian? Number two, can a Libertarian support things like school vouchers and maybe the HST because they're not as bad as the complete government monopoly in education or the HST? And the third question is, how hard should we fight the government? Right now, Mark Emery is in jail. I think when he first went to jail in Saskatchewan for passing a joint to someone else, he was treated relatively nice. And he got the idea, perhaps, that, hey, this is a way to push forward his values. Well, now I think he's sit in a place which is not nice at all. So how hard or how much are you willing to fight the state? And let's hear our guest opinions on this. And this time we're going to start with Pierre, and then Jed, and then Walter.
Yeah, I think I won't speak much on this because I don't have much to say, actually.
You did fight the state.
Yes, but I finally yes, I escaped to the United States. Because my thing is not drugs. If my thing was drugs, of course I would have stayed in Canada. In the United States, you know, my thing is guns, so
yeah,
it's much different in the United States. So that's why I would do that.
Second Amendment.
You know, I must say that I'm often surprised by very extreme natural law libertarians and how these very extreme moral theory-based libertarians actually deal with such issues. It seems to me that if you really believe that the state is nothing but a gang of robbers and murderers, as Lysander Spooner would say, it seems, and you believe this from a strong moral viewpoint, it seems to me that it is very difficult to make compromises. And well, we have examples of people who make few compromises. Mind you, it was easier at the time. Henry David Thoreau refused to pay taxes because he didn't want to support the war in Mexico and he didn't want to support slavery. Lysander Spooner, actually, I don't know what he did. He was a strange character, but he probably paid his taxes like everybody else with the gangs of robbers and murderers. But anyway, you know, so it seems to me that if you are really persuaded of this, you know, you must have a moral duty, you know, to fight until your last breath and let them come and get your guns from your dead cold hand. Now, the fact that most people do not do this, including us, actually, and that would prefer, you know, to come to meetings and talk and write books and this sort of thing, I think means that we don't really believe that the state is just a secret gang of robbers and murderers, that we believe that we owe some respect to the common opinion of mankind. I insist on the some because we don't owe respect to any sort of opinion, but we do owe some respect to the common opinion of mankind when it doesn't go too far. And so I would distinguish, you know, the moral position with a more practical position, which I think is much easier to take for people who don't believe in strong moral, natural law or natural right foundation of libertarianism. And it is to say then, well, you know, the state is a Leviathan. It does much more harm than it does good, or at least it does much more harm than it could do. We just have to live our lives with this and try to change it. But let's not, for instance, let's try not to go to an American jail for 5 years, for instance, or this sort of thing. You know, I have a lot of respect for people who actually do this. You know, and I have gone, well, you know, Bruce Montague has been in jail for 1 year for guns, you know, for having guns without a license in Canada. And, you know, I think it's great. But actually, this guy has been more or less broken. He doesn't want to fight anymore. They really broke him. And so we should try to manage that the state doesn't break us. And just to realize that we are in the world as it is, and we are trying to change the world, and to stay alive at the same time, and hopefully to have fun at the same time. It's difficult to have fun if you are in jail. But that's not very deep, but I fear it's the only thing I have to do. Now, probably, perhaps after my colleagues have talked, I'll find something or something.
Well, broadly speaking, I want to say, make 2 points here. Depending on how you count, let's call it 3. First, I remind everybody that the liberty rights are fundamentally negative rights. So they don't entail a duty to go out and prevent injustice, for example. It would be nice if you could, but you do not have a duty to do this by virtue of accepting the libertarian principle. So I think one of the things we have to emphasize is that probably all of us are wimps. And what we need to recognize is that there are rights for wimps, right? I mean, now, how far that should go is certainly a matter of calculation and prudential policy. But one does what one can, and what one can be limited by how good a life you are able to live as things stand. Now, that's foggy, but then that's partly the point. Well, then, so in part, I agree with Pierre that we don't have the duty to sacrifice our lives for the good, but we can still complain, and we can do so consistently, is my point. Secondly, there's the question of what the Libertarian Party is for, as distinct from, for example, the Liberty Institute, which some of you may know about. The Liberty Institute of Canada is devoted to promoting seminars, study of liberty around the country. And it's getting quite a lot of funding for this purpose, and the funding is interestingly now tax deductible, and so we're getting a lot more funding for that reason, and that seems to me to be a good thing. So what about the Libertarian Party? Well, it seems to me that having a Libertarian Party is a useful thing to do, because people do look at the votes, even when you have small numbers of them, they still look at those. Of course, it would be nice if the numbers were large. In order to do this, you of course have to agree that it's permissible to take government jobs, because when you elect somebody, you're electing him to a government job, namely MP. I taught at a state university during my entire academic career. It's too bad. I would much prefer that the university had not been a state university, but that was the only option that one had. And from within, I persuaded many an able student of the merits of the libertarian point of view, which I couldn't have done probably if I had no university to teach it in. So I think it is indeed possible to fight conscionably from within, and that the wars are primarily words for quite a long time. But it still seems to me that the Libertarian Party is useful, and in order for it to be useful, there's the question how much compromise it should do. And that's, I think, a very difficult and very interesting question. It does seem to me that the first priority, if you're going to have a meaningful political party, is a platform that identifies certain definite things that you want to do now, with other things down the list on the agenda, but things which can attract votes now, and that makes a publicity statement primarily. Nobody expects libertarians to win elections anytime soon, but if you don't even try, of course, then it's not likely that you're going to be able to do as much. Let's see, I said or three. What was the third thing? In effect, I've said the third thing. That is to say, there are two ways of promoting the libertarian message. And one, of course, is the usual way by study and writing books and whatnot. But I think the other one is to engage in genuine political activity with the caveats that I've already listed. So that's my short statement on that subject. There will be lots of discussion on details, as there should be.
This is our last session today. I'm doing my speech. That my two colleagues have done their speeches previously. Mine is tomorrow morning, Radical Ideas and Libertarianism. One of the questions that John asked about the fence, I don't think got a full answer. I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to convince you that his question was invalid, or namely answer it. I wanted to make a few comments before this subject. This idea that the state is unavoidable, the Holcomb view, nonsense. Nonsense on stilts. And I've got a paper criticizing him on this, and if you write me, I'll send you a copy of it. To just give you but one example of this, if the state is so goddamn inevitable, why don't we have world government?
That's what they're trying for.
We don't have world government now. We have 200 countries, and there seems to be no tendency toward it. And if it was so inevitable, right now there's anarchy between states. Portugal and China are in a state of anarchy within each other or between each other. Canada and Brazil are in a state of anarchy. If states were inevitable, that could not be. So the state is not inevitable. The first question is limits to accepting government services. I've written several articles on should Ron Paul accept government matching funds, or should the Libertarian Party accept government matching funds. My answer to him was in two parts. On a pragmatic or empirical sense, it would be foolish, because then people would say, aha, you don't really live up to your principles. So it would be foolish from a public, a publicity point of view. But from a libertarian point of view, it's absolutely no problem with accepting government money. Look, we all came here today. How did we get here? We got here on public roads, didn't we? So if we're consistent, we can't go on public roads because they're public roads. You see, we have reductios against the lefties. We say, look, if you believe in helping the poor, why don't you help the poor in Africa? Or if you believe in helping the poor so much, why do you have a car? People could use that car or that money. Or my favorite, why do you have two eyes? There are people who are blind who could use one of your eyes, and you've got two of them, and you're a hypocrite. You're such a great egalitarian. Well, they have a reductio ad absurdum against us, and we've got to refute it. We can't accept that. What they say is, if you're so much against the state, how come you're going to public school? Or how come, in my case, you're teaching in a public school? And I say, this is ridiculous. They are a band of robbers and thieves and murderers, and the less they have, the better. If we take from them, it's quite all right. Look, suppose one of us was behind the lines in Nazi Germany in 1942, and we drove out with one of their tanks or one of their armored cars. Would this be good or bad? Obviously, it would be good, because the Nazis were bad guys. Now, I admit that the Canadian government and the American government aren't as bad as the Nazis, but they are in the same category. So if we take from them, we're entirely justified. They have no right to these things. Look, if we were really going to be consistent, we couldn't use the post office, we couldn't use libraries, we couldn't use the rec centers, we couldn't carry cash, Canadian cash in our wallets, we couldn't interact. We would have to either go off and live in the woods somewhere or commit suicide. That would be the only honorable thing for a libertarian to do if we accept their crappy reductio ad absurdum. But we don't. We don't have to accept that.